We have two quick topics before we start the lecture. I guess four. If you have an after-school parent, we're booking now for 2 weeks after spring break. That'll pretty much be like our second to last week of movies. Then, if you have mushroom photos, show them to me. Your particulate collectors are due tomorrow. Make sure you bring them back tomorrow. How many of you have already ordered your AP tests? How many of you were aware the deadline is Friday? How many of you had no idea the deadline is this Friday? Well, there we go.
How do you order them?
I believe you can order them over the web, but that's just for the payment. Either way, you got to go to the business office. So you either pay online, then go to the business office, or you take your blank check / credit card directly to the business office.
And that's for all of them? It's not just AP?
That's for all AP exams, that's right. And if everybody orders by Friday, you can pre-register on the day after spring break, which is really worth it. How many of you have already decided whether or not you're taking the AP test for APES? How many of you have not decided yet? I want to remind you that usually there's a pretty direct correlation between your grade on my unit exams and your grade on the AP test. Assuming you do the review process. A, B, C usually gets 5, 4, or 3. D and F on my exams tend to score a 2 or a 1 on the AP test. But this assumes you do the review process. A averages in my class have gotten the 1 on the AP test because they failed to do the review process. And I have had a couple students who had D or F averages get like 3 or 4 on the exam by doing an exceptional amount of study work. You can theoretically learn everything in the last few weeks. But usually, I would say 90% of the time, of students who do the review process, A, B, C, D, F correlate to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 on the AP test. Yeah?
We have one more chapter after this.
We have one more unit after this.
And is that a 2-week one?
It's like 2 weeks and a couple days.
And then right after that is the exam.
Yeah, so we have 5 weeks of school left after spring break. We spent 3 finishing the class, and then 2 full weeks of review right before the AP test.
5 weeks until the AP test is done.
That's the end of my class, though. Then the whole... I'm sorry. Can I help with anything? Is there a question? 5 weeks? After the AP test, there's like 4 weeks left of school. During those 4 weeks, you do the year-end project. Yeah?
What's the structure of
It's exactly 4 times the length of a unit exam. 100 multiple choice and 4 pre-response questions and 4 times the time. So it's quadruple the length and quadruple the time. But it's the same format, the same distribution of questions. You got a couple of word banks. You know how like the first one on my test is always a word bank or an answer bank? So you'll get like maybe 15 to 20 answer bank points. There'll probably be like 4 or 5 questions that require mandatory math work on the multiple choice. 4 or 5 where you're looking at a visual diagram, something or other. And then 4 true response questions. Each has 4 to 5 sections. Yeah?
How much is each AP test?
No. Anybody else?
I think it's $80.
$89? Unless you have a fee waiver. Some students have a fee waiver. What else? Anybody want to talk more about the AP test? Business office. Okay. The last thing I want to do in assignment 9.4 is controlling air pollution. Because we talked about smog already, right? There's 2 kinds, the brown and the gray. We got that? On Friday?
Yeah.
Inversion layers. We did inversion layers on Friday? I'm sorry, anybody speaking?
Yes.
Yes? Cool. So, how to avoid air pollution. There's basically 3 categories of regulations. Remember we told you that these are all criteria? So the main 3 categories of regulation are particulate control. This is for like factories and industrial, large scale, like lumber yards. Industrial particulate control. Cars, like individual personal transportation. And power plants, the 3 main types. All 3 of these, I need everybody to understand. The goal is usually containment. Once you have that stuff, you still got to deal with it. It's just easier to deal with it in a barrel than it is to deal with it in the atmosphere. First, the particulates. Back in the day, factories would just open the doors and the windows, and the neighbors would die. Primarily for economic reasons, factories started letting the stuff ventilate through the roof, and then they figured, to get it away from their workers, and then they figured out that if you pile up bricks, you can get that air pollution to go high enough that your workers stay healthier, and healthier workers are better for business, and better for them, and better for the neighborhood, and better for society, so right on. The very first pollution control was the good old smokestack. Just getting it away from people. Same pollution, let's just lift it higher into the air. Once the pollution gets up into the air, the wind can move it. It's colder, so it'll keep rising. So the very first and probably the most important type of air pollution control was the chimney. Additionally, there's all these ways that you can trap particulates. Watch. You can let them settle out of the turbulence before the gases leave. Then you put them in a box and bury them or something. You can trap them inside of a filter, like a vacuum bag. You can use centripetal force in this thing called a cyclone. So the gas goes around in a circle. There's all these little baffles that trap all of the particulates. You can just get them wet. You make them mud. So all of that smoke gets sprayed by water. And then, of course, the particulates get dragged down by the water. And then you've got like a slurry of particulates. Or, this is my favorite, you can apply a charge to the particulate matter by pushing it through an electromagnet. and then trap it in an electromagnet of the opposite charge. It's called electrostatic precipitation. You use electricity to make static, and then it is trapped, and then when you turn it off, it just rains out. Anybody want to ask me about these particulate controls? This is a classic AP question. That's why this has a 3-star rating. Anybody want to ask me anything about 331? Yeah?
Which ones are effective, which ones are ineffective, where are large more expensive?
I think the big question is what sort of particulates you're talking about. So for large particulates, like sawdust, like filters are probably the most common, and those are probably really effective because they're pretty big. You know, sawdust is something you can see with the naked eye. For really fine stuff, I think it might be the electrostatic precipitators, because if it's pretty much invisible, you're not going to be able to trap it mechanically, so you have to use that charge trick. Scrubbers have peripheral benefits, so that water also provides chemical benefit down here. So I think it just depends on your pollution type. I think different pollutants, different particulate controls. And I'm not really an expert on the details.
Do all big power plants have to have something fancy like that, or can they just have some?
I think all power plants are probably the most regulated air pollution emitters. So power plants probably have the most hurdles to jump. I think relatively simple mechanical pollution, like I think sawdust is a really good example. There's really no chemistry to worry about with wood shavings that I'm aware of, especially if you're just milling. All you've got literally is just wood shavings. And so I would think for a wood mill, like, that should be fine. Or maybe even that would be fine. I think different pollution, different issues. I think power plants are probably the most heavily regulated.
And do they get tax breaks if they go out of the way to make sure that there's no emissions?
Maybe. I would imagine it's probably more stick than carrot. So if they go over an emission limit, then they probably get penalized.
Right.
And remember that all of these, when I say regulation, that doesn't mean you have to trap everything. It's a percentage. So they have allowable emissions. And they just have to stay below that level. So they're allowed to leak a little. If they go over, then they get busted. I don't know if there's big tax breaks for doing stuff extra. There might be some sort of like a, if you go above and beyond, some kind of benefit. I don't know. Anybody else? In cars, the simplest thing and the first thing you check if you're trying to clean up a car is just get the timing right so you're getting complete combustion. Prevent carbon monoxide, because carbon monoxide is toxic even for the driver. Have you guys heard that a lot of times people get smuggled across international borders or conflict zones in the back of trucks? A lot of times that doesn't go so well, because old crappy trucks will have leaks in the exhaust, and so you get exhaust going into the interior of the truck. Will you pause this thing for a minute?